So on that note, let's have a quick look at some of Steve's jumps. So this first one is in Vault Manchester back in 2009. Steve jumped a PB 575. Have a look at this.
As you can see, a lot faster, and
he speeded it up, by the way. That's 150%.
So Steve was jumping from 18 steps compared to Nick's 20 steps, and this was on a Carbon FX pole at this point in Steve's career.
Yep. So I was actually trialing here. These are the, what do they call the weave, the light poles, like even the lighter ones. So context before this, I'd just flown back from Moscow 5 days before this competition, where I borrowed poles. Poles didn't show up. Used Carbon FX's Jump 560, and again, a little bit of a story. A Russian coach, said something along the lines of, "Oh, you know, you're pretty good. Like maybe if it comes together, you can jump like 570." And it really annoyed me because I was like, "I'm going to jump 80 indoors, like for sure. Like I've trained so hard." And I flew back, and I was on a mission from the moment I left the track in Moscow to when I got here, and basically, when I picked the weave pole up, everything felt better. It was like I'd gone and used a heavier pole I actually just used their grips. I didn't bother retaping and taping. because we're all using black tape, we just kind of shared poles, but it didn't feel good to me. But I still jumped pretty well in Moscow, and then came here and then had all my own setup at home. I obviously drove to the meet, so didn't have much travel and things like that. But this was a special kind of breakthrough jump for me.
I was there. I remember watching this.
Yeah, I never had to worry on these poles about pole drop, and I reckon I was a bit quicker because of that. So when I switched to UCS Spirit a bit later in my career, I couldn't do what I did there with the pole, which was like really slot it early.
Yeah.
And that really helped take off. I didn't get into that position kind of when Nick was at, where the pole wasn't dropping fast enough, because I could drop it early and not be worried about the weight of it. But I think this is a 5'10", probably mid 13s, low 13, kind of similar numbers. Body weight would have been pretty similar. And I was kind of, one of my things as a jumper was I'd always take off pretty far out, which I think affected kind of pole dynamics and how pole would compress and roll, and how I could meet the pole with my rot back. It was always almost like the pole was dropping a little bit and I couldn't ever get tight enough. And then I coupled that with some habits from my younger days when I would collapse my left arm. So I had a lot of issues with that. So them two things together worked against me a little bit. But these jumps to me just felt really easy. Like I remember jumping on this day, like I was going to jump higher. Actually at 582, I think I went to after this, I cracked the pole. The pole like fractured in the jump and it made a noise and we stopped. So that was kind of the end of this meet. So I actually felt that was more in the tank. But I think, Scott, am I right in saying that Nationals was like a week after this? And we wrapped it up thinking that we were going to kind of move into the next meet and go into the 80s.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And then actually it led, you came fourth at European Indoors like a month later, which was a phenomenal performance for where you were in your career at the time. And then, of course, that summer you came seventh at World Champs in Berlin with, I think, a 65 or a 70 jump. So, yeah, it was just 09, like you say, was a huge breakthrough year for you after having kind of a couple of years of tough experiences at the majors.
Yeah. No, yeah, I definitely remember that because I jumped, and the guys will appreciate this, but I jumped 570 back to back. So 70 in qualifying, full competition for me because I wasn't a better jumper than a 570 vaulter. So I went through a full 520, 40, 60, 70 qualifier and then made the final and then went off Europeans, had a nice bath, went back to the hotel and then came back and jumped 570 the next day, which was a big confidence booster.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Tough to do that.
Yeah. And then the other video, Steve, I don't have either of your 580 jumps, actually, I'm afraid, my man. I don't have your 82 from Stetchen or your 80 from Ryan. But what I do have is I do have a 571 jump 6 years later in 2015 in Albuquerque. where you've obviously moved to Spirit. There's obviously a few technical changes that you've made, but some of the stuff that you've just referenced around your pole dynamics and the left arm kind of manipulating and steering the jump, you can definitely see it quite clearly in this jump. So have a look at this, and then let's talk a bit about that.
Yep. So yeah, a lot of differences. After I had a pretty bad pole snap, I changed after that pole snap to Spirit. And yeah, a few things changed. I widened up grip a little bit. I didn't feel as confident with a narrow grip and the pole falling as fast as it was falling. I was actually happy gripping high on all poles. I never had an issue gripping high. Like I gripped 5 meters off 10 steps once. And 5'10", I think max grip ever was 5'15". So I was able to grip really high, but I was never able to time it up that well. I think this is 5'10", probably 12.5 coming in off. I had a slight hamstring issue going on here, and this was another day I didn't expect to jump this well. But yeah, you can see grip was wider, a little bit more hesitation around the last couple of steps, but kind of, yeah, big grip, big pole, a lot of momentum, and able to time it up. But yeah, probably another big takeoff, like 435. I'm outside my top hand, and then kind of get stuck in the middle here. And then just because I've got enough grip and enough compression on the pole, I end up getting out of it just about okay, but definitely not capturing all the energy in the pole.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, I don't want to go too crazy on technical analysis tonight, but it also looks like on the run, your right hand is now kind of much freer and further behind your hip, which is, I know, something that Dan advocates a lot when he talks about running with the pole and having that kind of freedom to move and not getting married on having your right hand bolted to your hip like the Petrov model. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so something we definitely worked on, and definitely as the poles got heavier. So biggest pole I took off on was 520, 12.0. So like when poles are getting that big, and 5, 10, 12 points were kind of bread and butter for me in finals. When, yeah, and especially Spirits, like you've like having some space off your hip and being able to bring your front hand in a little bit. And actually Nick does this really well. You can see on his videos, like just having the balance and point of the pole back a little bit really helped with the weight of the pole and being able to focus on kind of running mechanics. So that really helped me with Dan, and obviously thinking about just kind of how the wrists worked, how the grip, and how we pinched the pole, how we use glue, how the pole would roll and line up for the soft side and all those components. But yeah, we definitely changed a lot of that, and a lot of that was because of the switch from carbon to fiberglass.
Okay, cool. And then just talking about some of the challenges that you faced with your swing, and like you say, the pole running on you a little bit and not quite ever being able to kind of time up with it. I mean, a lot of schools of thought would suggest that a wider grip makes that even harder. So was that a real kind of struggle for you, knowing that, you know, the wider grip gave you confidence, but at the same time was maybe kind of getting in the way a little bit with regards to your swing kind of mechanics?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and kind of, I think something Nick said alluded to this, but technical changes, like I could show you 10 training videos where you're able to make these like big breakthrough changes, but when you go to competition, especially when you've got federation pressures, sponsorship pressures, all these different pressures that you have to go and perform, it's really easy just to slip back into the old habits and just try and grind out a result. And that was kind of typical for me year after year. I feel like I'd have big breakthroughs in training and hit some really nice shapes, like change some big things in the technical model, but carrying that through a season and carrying the pressures of, you know, having to perform in a season, like it was difficult. And I think coming into this meet, like you say, nothing's ever perfect. I mean, this meet and the setup to this, I had a hamstring problem. I actually stopped halfway down the run up of my 580 attempt on the next run, and I took about 3 weeks out after this meet with a hamstring issue. So just obviously all the different things that are going on, and it's hard to be like, okay, well today I'm going to turn up and just grip this 5'10", 12.5 like a small 10-step pole and run in and do a really nice technical jump. It's hard to put all your faith in something that you've not had much time to live in, a technique you haven't had much time to live in.
Yeah, that's a great point, and yeah, thanks for making that so clear to some of our viewers this evening. Before we move on and have a quick look at Harry, I just want to kind of sing Steve's praises. Really, we looked at a 7-year span there in 570 jumps, and Steve jumped 570 no less than 24 times in his career, and over 560 he had 65 competitions. I mean, that's just amazing depth for a very long period of time. So huge kudos to Steve for doing that and doing it in so many different ways as well, different brands of poles, different technical models, different coaching setups. He was a searcher and somebody that was really kind of out there pioneering and seeking kind of perfection in his craft. And yeah, huge credit for him for the way that he went about that. But that then brings us along to Harry, who jumped that amazing 585 in Manchester a couple of months ago that we're going to have a look at now. And I'll give Harry a chance to talk about it, and then I'm going to let Nick and Steve kind of pass some comments on it as well. So let's have a look at Harry's 585 from Manchester. Have you guys managed to watch that?
It's just rolling.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, yes, all right.
Are you guys able to watch that in half speed as well as full speed?
Yeah, it's on this now. Yeah.
Yep.
So Harry's jumping from 16 steps. He's using a UCS Spirit pole. This was a 5 meter 12.7, pretty much thumb in the end. And on this jump for the first time in his life, he caught a takeoff at about 4:30.
Finally, after many years of trying.
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm going to let everybody talk about this a little bit. But Harry, don't analyze it too much technically. We'll let Steve and Nick do that. But just talk to us a little bit about the kind of what went on this day and what was going on in your mind when you took this jump.
Yeah, so like I say, I mean, I was a little bit ill that morning and stuff like that. But as soon as I started warming up, I sort of knew I was on. It was just one of those days where, like, when you get into warm up, like, little things are all right. Like my stiff pole off 4 is like terrible. And I like started jumping, and it was just going well. And I was
wheel of death.
And yeah, well, that's the thing. I started jumping, and it was just going really well from the get go. So I sort of knew that I was on that day. But then obviously you never know what happens until you start going through the competition. And one of the main things I want to say about this is, like, so the pole I'm using, like Scott said, is a 5 meter 12.7. This is a pole that I've only used 3 times in my life. Like, I would never touch this in training or like even try on a raise run or anything like that. But having like just the setup and the confidence to actually take this in comp, like knowing that I'm ready for it, is like the main thing that's helped me get to this point. Because at one point, like, I would have needed to use poles in training just to get off them and things like that. But yeah, just building confidence to this point is sort of how it came about, really.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then Steve and Nick, I don't know how much you've kind of looked at this jump, but what are your thoughts with this guy? You kind of like what you're seeing? Are you seeing scope for more, or which direction would you take him in? Not that I'm panicking about where to go next, but I'm just interested in your perspective.
He's got no plan.
Nick, Age Before Beauty, go ahead.
Nick, you still there?
I'll go while Nick gets up.
Yeah.
So what I love about this jump is he doesn't over press. It's like he's living in the model. He's obviously changed onto a pole that is a challenging pole, but it doesn't look that way. It's not like he's trying to grind out, produce more speed, produce more power. He obviously knows that the only change he needs is flex. So it's nice to see a well-balanced jump. And when things look like this, it just looks easy, right? Like, there's nothing about that jump that looks laborious or looks like he's over pushing, over trying. And his takeoff being a bit further out, like I've seen a lot of Harry's jumps where he's a bit closer. It just gave him, like, it looks like it's going in super speed when he kicks through the bottom and he gets to inversion. It's really impressive how tight he gets and how far back he gets on the pole and how much compression is still in the pole and how he matches that. So I really love them components of the jump. I think he does a really good job of taking the energy back out of full compression and staying with the pole. I definitely think it's all positive. I mean, there's definitely room for more grip. There's room for more flex. I mean, it's just a matter now of getting more reps on poles this size, on runs this big, if not bigger, and just repping out more of these jumps. But yeah, like kind of in that freeze frame there, I mean, he's getting so much energy back from that pole. It's really good to see.
I mean, like I said before, if there's one thing that I'd always like fall back on, it's the technical. And like you said, like I think a big part of the technical is sort of just bleeding everything you can out of a pole, I think. So like that's pretty much on the limit for that size of pole. Like you say, bit of space for more grip, maybe more run up is probably the way to go to keep moving from there. But yeah, I think going back to the takeoff thing, taking off, I mean, what I would call far, like what a lot of people would just call average, to be honest, is quite a challenging thing for me. Just because, like, when I was younger and more like coming through, I would have gone with probably like the model that I based my jump off was probably Steve Hooker's, which is just sort of going crazy in the swing, getting upside down, and then really letting the pole sort of lift you up through the jump and just trying to stay away from the bar. But obviously, unless you're as physically gifted as that guy, there's no way you can get poles this size in from the takeoff space and places like that. But yeah, getting out to like 420, 430 plus takeoff spaces and still throwing the same jump is the main challenge. But I mean, on the day it just came together.
Yep, and obviously I'm really close with Steve, and the one thing he would say himself is if he could change anything, he would take off at 430 all day long. And
yeah,
he felt the pressure of the box coming that quick and being that close, and he really hated that space. And that's one thing he really wanted to work on, and I think we had a lot of discussions around. So I think that space, I don't think it's the fact that you can't jump high close, because we've seen a lot of people do it. It's just the longevity and having a 420, a 430, if you're gripping 5 meters, it just feels easier, and you just keep repping it out. You look at Renault, you look at Mondo, you look at these guys. I mean, it just doesn't see, and look at this jump here, like it just doesn't look hard. It looks like it's flowing. It looks like it's easy.
While we've got this freeze frame there, it's just gone anyway. But so this jump, like it hit home for me, especially like how important that takeoff space is, because if you look there where my hips are, I mean, I was still traveling across the bar. The stand's on 65, but I mean, frames and frames after leaving the pole, I'm still traveling across the bar. Where if you look at any of my 80 jumps indoors and, on my previous 70 jumps and things like that, where I'm taking off about 415, both my indoor 80 jumps were stands on 40. So it's like, you can clearly see the right direction that we need to go in, but it's like you say, it's getting all those components together, which is the difficult thing. What I would say is, and actually this might split opinions, especially I feel maybe from Scott, but if I was going to teach somebody pole vault like from scratch, I would still start the way that I started with the technical, because I feel like trying to correct things on the pole, and especially things at the top end of the pole when you're later on in your career is far more difficult than the way that I've done it, which is learn like sort of crazy swing and top end pole technique, but then try and add a takeoff onto that. I don't know many people who've managed to do it the other way, where they've had a really excellent takeoff and then put a really sort of good technical vault on the end of it successfully, really.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's obvious from all the countries that have adopted a model, right? So the Germans have a model, the Russians have a model, and then coaches respectively have moved around the world and introduced that models to different countries like Australia. So for the guys down there, they would jump in the Russian model, but the UK's never really had that, right? We've always been searching for something, trying to copycat something. We've never had really, I mean, Steve was the first guy to come in. Obviously he coached Paul, but he coached Paul from scratch, learning the event himself. He hadn't worked underneath like Alex, who was bringing a model there. So Steve was piecing it together. So I think you make a really good point that I think it is very important with pole vaulters that they learn early good technique, and like you say, you can add speed and strength to it. And I think how many vaulters do we see now jump in 60s, 70s, 80s that don't have the physical talent that we thought people needed to do that, because they know how to get the most out of smaller poles. You know, if you said to Nick and myself, hey, the model's not Bubka, it's not running 10, taking off at 10.2, gripping on 10 points and trying to go always in pole on this linear progression of like pole choice, pole flex, but it's Renault, it's Mondo, where we start thinking about like how much compression can we get, how tight to the pole can we get, how much can we gamify pole vault to like see how high we can go. It's like that mind shift change is happening, and I think it's a good point for British pole vaulting to like get onto and start seeing the importance in them grassroots and them early days for young athletes.
Yeah.
I'm interested in Nick's thoughts on Harry's jump in just a second, but it is an interesting debate, and I don't think there is a right answer. But yeah, from what I've seen, and I think it's probably because the bit of the work on the pole is the really cool stuff to do, right? Kids love practicing on pole technique. Coaches generally love teaching on pole technique because it's the bit
a kid will jump to his heart's content as long as he can. So
exactly. So typically when people are coming to work with me at the moment, a lot of the time the on-pole technique is actually pretty good because that's what they've been working on through their ages of like 14, 15, 16, 17 and doing a lot of repetition in that space. But what's lacking is then an understanding of the approach run, how to put a good structured approach run together, understanding the different phases of the approach, how to time up the pole drop, and ultimately hit a big pole with a big grip consistently enough that gives you confidence that you can then take up a jump using that technique that you've learned. And I don't know which is better to do first. I don't know whether it's chicken and egg and whatever. But at the moment, it's relatively easy to fix people's runways as long as they're open-minded to the fact that they need to change it. And if they've got then good on-pole technique, actually you're right. It's once you've taught them the runway, the rest of it's actually pretty easy.